Hey guys, welcome to today's video. At work, I was asked recently to build a little swiper component, but let's face it, it's a huge undertaking. You have to take care of a lot of stuff like performance and responsiveness. So during my search, I found this new library called SwiperJS. As you can see, it's still in active development, it's still being maintained, and in my experience, it's incredibly easy to use. So in this video, you guys are going to learn how to use SwiperJS in your React+Typescript application. So let's get started. So to create a project, I go npm create read at latest. Then I do yes, and then it will ask me for my project name. Let's call it Swiper tutorial. For my framework, I'll go for React, of course, and then I'll choose for TypeScript and SWC. Okay, so now let's go to my Swiper tutorial folder and of course npm install. So when this step is complete, I'll open this project folder in VS Code. Okay, now that I'm in VS Code, I would first need to install my dependencies. So within my command line, I can simply go npm install Swiper. So it seems to be done, and then if I go to source app.tsx, I want to remove all of this code. I basically don't need any of this, so I'll do so now. There seems to be a problem. I have to end this div element. So now that I've installed Swiper, I would first need to import its styles as well. To do so, I'd go to app.css, and on the top here, I'll import like so, and then my CSS file. So swiper/css. I have to put a semicolon, and then here we're done. Let's now create a Swiper component. So within my src directory, I'll create a new file. Let's call it main swiper.tsx. And here I'll use AI to build a minimal React component. So I'll simply go build a blank React TypeScript component called main swiper. Now it's been built. So here, this is where I'll use my SwiperJS component. So what I'll do here is import Swiper from Swiper React, and then I create an array for my data, like the data I want to display within the Swiper component. So let's do const computers list. It's going to be an array of objects. So the first object is going to be, for example, the title. That's a framework computer, and then let's give it an image as well. So I'll do just image. I found an image for this framework computer. I'll paste it like so, and then I'll do this for more computers. So for example, here's for my MacBook, here's an entry for the Dell XPS laptop, and finally here's another entry for a ThinkPad. Let's now create our Swiper component. So within my div element, I'll simply go Swiper, and then I end this tag like so, and within my Swiper, I'll go a curly bracket, and then I'll use a map method. So computers list dot map item, and then for each item, I want to display a SwiperSlide like so. It should have a key as well, so it should be item.title, let's call it. So my SwiperSlide, as the name suggests, is going to be each slide of my Swiper component. So for each slide, I'm going to render a dev, and it's going to be a title. Oops, it's going to be an item.title. I'll add a paragraph component instead, and then an image like so. So image as source, so it's going to be item.image, and then I end this tag. So I made an error. It's not going to be image, it's just going to be img. I'll also give it a height of around 200, and then let's run this code. So npm run dev. So now it's given me a link. I'll click on this link, and then I'll get an output. So here's what I get. It's an empty screen. This is because I made a mistake. Let's go back to app.tsx and actually render this component. So main swiper. So now going back to the browser, notice now we have a functional Swiper component. So I use my mouse to drag, and notice I actually have a working slider. There are a couple more properties you can change. For example, within my Swiper component, there's a property called space between. So the space between each slide, and if you want, we can even configure the number of slides per page. So it's slides per view. Let's set it to 2 for this time. So now let's go back Firefox, and then I'll refresh my page. Great. Now as you can see, we have 2 images per slide. Let's go back to VS Code, and then we can even configure more properties. We also have a few event handlers, one of them being on slide change. So for example, I can simply go console.log, the slide has been changed. Going back to Firefox, and then if I open my inspect element or my developer view, I'll put it within the browser to dock to write within the console, and then I refresh. So every time I swipe, notice that now we have a message telling us that the slide has now been changed. Furthermore, so our swiper component also gives us access to multiple hooks. These hooks allow you to access information about your slide or your swiper and also execute swiper or slider related functions. Here, I'll try to use my useSwiper hook. So I'll go back to VS Code. Here, I'll create another component. Let's call it SwiperButton.tsx. And again, I'll use AI to create a blank React component. So here what I will do, I'll simply go const swiper to get the swiper instance. So use swiper. Now what it will do is I'll get the swiper instance. I have to fix my imports, quick fix, and then add imports. Now here when I have a button, I can simply use an on-click handler. So when this button has been clicked, I want the user or I want the slider component to go to the next slide. Swiper.slide next. Here I can add some message, so go next. Let's now use this component. So I'll go to main swiper and then within my swiper component, at the end I can go swiper button. That's it. I'll go back to Firefox and here I have a go next button. Let me refresh to get rid of these errors. Okay, so now if I go next, like if I click on this button, I can now go to the next slide. So the SwiperJS library also has access to this useSwiperSlide hook. With this, I can get slide related data. So let's go back to VS Code to use our hook. So I create a new file. Let's call it slideinfo.tsx. And here I copy the code from swiper button. It's more or less going to be a bit similar, but I don't want the swiper instance. I want the slide instance. So use SwiperSlide. And then I'll change it to slide data. I'll also remove this. I'll just add a div component instead, replace it to div. So now slide data will have access, of course, to whether the slide is active. So I can do a curly brace. Here I can give a background color as white and I can give the width as 100%. So I want this component to take up the whole width of the parent. And what I want to do here, I want to check if my slide is active or if the user is on that slide. So I can simply go slide data dot is active. If they are active, I want to display a span component with the color of black and I want to show that the current slide is active. Like so. So slide is just active. I'll now remove this import and then let's use it within my swiper component. So within SwiperSlide, so every slide should have access to this slide info component like so. So slide info.tsx. Sorry, just slide info and then I add this component. There's an error here. I'll go back to slide info and I'll change it, or I'll change these function names to slide info. Slide info. Finally, what I can do here, I can go back to main swiper and then I fix my imports, quick fix, and then add an import. Okay, so going back to our code, notice that we now have a banner that tells us that they're now on an active slide. So every time I swipe, the banner changes its position. Swipe again, now it's on the active slide. Great, let's now move on. So the SwiperJS team also has developed a set of modules. They allow you to extend the functionality of your swiper component. In this video, I'll discuss a few modules that I think are important. Let's first start by the navigation module. To get the navigation module, I go modules and then it accepts an array. So for example, I can add the navigation module, the swiper-modules or /modules, then enter, and then I add a navigation boolean. So this tells my swiper component to add navigation. Going back to Firefox, if I refresh, notice that now I have two components that whenever I click, it goes to the next or the previous slide, but they don't look really well. This is because I did not import its required CSS file. So I go back to VS Code. So within app.css, I press enter and then add import swiper/css/navigation and then a semicolon. I save this code and then I go back. I'll now refresh the page and notice that now I have two buttons that actually look very nice. We can even add the pagination module. So it's simply pagination. And then to add pagination, again, it's just the pagination boolean. And then I save it and I go back to Firefox. I refresh the page. So notice I don't have the pagination component. It's because I did something wrong. So within VS Code, checking my code again, it's actually an object. So two curly braces and then it should be clickable as true. So within app.css, again, I have to import the style. So import swiper/css/pagination. So refreshing Firefox, notice I have my pagination component is this small blue dot that keeps on changing positions depending on my slide. slide, but it's on top of my button. But temporarily, I'll just remove this go next button. So going back to VS Code, within main swiper, I remove the swiper button, or I'll just comment it out. There's another module I would like to show you guys, which is called Scrollbar. So it basically just adds the scroll bar on a slide. So it's just Scrollbar equals, so it's a property, draggable, and let's set it to true. Going back to Firefox, notice that now we have a small scroll bar. Let me zoom in so it's more easier to see. So every time I scroll to the left, the scroll bar also goes to the left. To make it more obvious, I'll change the background color of my swiper component. So style, background color, let's set it to white. Going back to Firefox, now I hope it's more visible to you. If we want, we can also change or customize the properties of our scroll bars or our other modules. So for example, let's first start by customizing the navigation module. So looking at the documentation, we can simply see that these components, like these navigation components, are just standard div elements that have a CSS class attached to them. So we can simply change the CSS properties of these components. So going back to VS Code, I can simply go to my navigation, and here I can add a couple more properties. So for example, we have a property called next EL, which is basically the button that when clicked goes to the next slide. In other words, it's this button right here. So if I want, I can change the selector of this component. So let's call it swiper-button-next. So now I can create a div component right around this swiper tag. So let's create a div here. Within my div, I want a button. So button, and then let's give it a class name of my selector, which is swiper-button-next. And then we'll do an end tag right here. So going back to my code, notice that I now have a customized button. I can go back to VS Code to change more of its styles. For example, here I can add a style. Let's set the background color to pink, and we can even set the font color or just the color to red, like so. Going back to Firefox, notice now I have a button that in my opinion looks way better. We can even do the same for the prev button or the button that goes to the previous slide. So I go prev l.swipers-button-prev, and I create another button like so. So button class name once again, and then swiper-button-next. Swiper-button-prev. For my style, I'll give it a bit different style. So let's just give it a background color of blue and the color of white. And then I save my code. Going back to Firefox, I now have a custom prev button as well. If we want, we can even add custom icons here. So for example, I can end this button component like so, and then I can add an SVG element. So here I'll be using the hero icons library. So npm install @hero icons/react. So now that it's been installed, here I'll be using my arrow right circle icon, and for my prev button, I'll do the same thing. So I'll end this tag like so. And here I'll add an arrow left circle icon. So going back to Firefox, if I refresh the page, these buttons look really small. So I'll go back here within VS Code, I'll set the font size to 10, and I'll do the same here. So font size as 10. And going back, now in my opinion, these buttons look way better. So if I want, I can also bring these components, or I can bring this button down. Since these are normal standard React components, I can do whatever I want. So going back to Firefox, what I can do is I can set the style. So for example, I'll set the flex or the display to flex. I can set the flex direction to column, and I can also add the margin top to 40 pixels. So going back to my Firefox window, nothing really has happened. So I'll set the position as well. So the position should be relative. Going back to Firefox, now as you can see, it's now below. And going back, I think more of this code is not really important. It's not really being used, so I'll remove it and let's test it out once again. Okay, so far so good. Let's now move on to applying the same customization to our pagination component. So according to my documentation, the pagination also has a set of classes that we can change. So let's go to app.css. So I want to change the bullet active class. So for example, it's just swiper-pagination-bullet-active. It should be a selector, so it's a dot. Here I can set the background color like so. So background color as pink, and testing it out. I refresh the page. Okay, so now as you can see, it's pink. Going back, Now let's look for more classes. So for example, this pagination bullet class, let's just copy it and I can go back to app.css. Let's set its background color to, let's say, white. Going back to Firefox, and then if I go back here, now they're completely white. So I think it has overridden the pink background color. So let's try something else. So going back to VS Code, what workaround we can do is, instead of setting the background color, we can set a border instead. So let's do border solid 2 pixels and the border should be black. And going back to Firefox, notice that now I have an active border with the color that stands out. So within our main swiper, there are a couple more modules that I want to show off. So for example, there is a Parallax module. So as the name suggests, this just adds a parallax effect to your slides. So for example, what I can do is I can add a parallax effect to my paragraph. To do so, I just go data-swiper-parallax, and it has to be a value. So for example, let me give a large number like -800. So now every paragraph within my slide will have a parallax effect, but we're not done yet. Let's go to app.css, add import swiper/css/parallax. Then I go back to main swiper. Here I just add the parallax effect. Going back to Firefox, let me refresh the page and let's see if it works. Cool. As you can see, every time I try to swipe, I have a parallax effect on my title. And in my opinion, it looks way better. There's another module I want to show off. For example, the Autoplay module. So of course, as the name suggests, it allows autoplay for your slide. And then to add autoplay, I can simply go autoplay, and it has a property called delay. I'll just set it to 1000 to speed it up, and then I'll go back to Firefox, let's refresh, and hopefully after a second, yeah, as you can see, even though I'm not touching my mouse, it's iterating through these slides on its own. Okay, so going back, I'll just comment this code out. It's a bit irritating to watch. And now let's move on. So within SwiperJS, there's also a concept of a controller. So what it does is it basically tries to sync multiple swiper instances with each other. Let's first try by doing a one-way controller. To do so, I'll add another component called controller, and then I'll create another swiper component. So new file, second swiper.tsx. So now I'll write some code to create a blank React component. Thanks to AI, it will do it for me on its own. Component called second swiper. So going back to the reference code here, we need to have a shared state as well. So what I'll do, I'll go to app.tsx. Here I'll go const controlled swiper, and then set controlled swiper, and it should be a use state. Since this is TypeScript, I would also want to add style. So I go import swiper as swiper class from swiper/types. Going back to my use state, I'll go swiper class. So it's a control, and then let's set it to control swiper. Now I need to fix my code. So I'll go back to main swiper, and then I'll add some props. So let's do a type main swiper props. Here I go controlled swiper of type swiper, or it can also be undefined. Now I need to import my swiper class once again. So import swiper as swiper class from swiper/types. So it's just swiper class. And then I'll pass in my props like so. So main swiper props as the generic, and then a control swiper. So scrolling down, within my swiper component, I'll add my controller like so. So controller, curly braces, and then for my control, I'll add control swiper. I'll go back to app.tsx to display my second swiper. This time it's gonna use the set control swiper. So let's set it to set control swiper as set control swiper. Going back to second swiper, I'll add my type once again. So type second swiper props equals set second swiper is going to be a function which will accept a swiper of swiper class and will return a void. And then I pass in as a generic, so second swiper props set second swiper. So what I'll do is I'll create a swiper component, swiper, and I'll add some data like so. So const computers list once again, but this time I'll only add the names of those computers. So I'll just copy this code like so. I'll paste it here, and I'll remove the image property from all of these. Cool. So now with my entries removed and my data cleaned, I can simply go computers list.map item SwiperSlide key is going to be item.title, and it's just going to display a paragraph, and it's just going to display an item.title. So what I want to do is I want to pass in the second swiper. So just like before, modules, an array of controller, and furthermore, since I want my second swiper to control my main swiper, this time I have to do on swiper. So basically when the swiper is made, I want to assign this instance to my set second swiper hook. Set second swiper. Furthermore, I realized that my prop name is wrong, so I'll just change it like so. So I'll do set controlled swiper instead. So going back to my app.tsx file, I'll now fix my code. So it's not going to be control, it's going to be controlled swiper instead. And here I have to add a self-ending tag. Let's see if it now works. Okay, so previously I said that my second swiper, which is this one, should be controlling the first swiper, but obviously I was wrong here. What my code did was it was using the first swiper to change the movement of the second swiper. So as you can see, our code now works. We can even make it two-way swiper. To do so, what I have to do is I have to create two more hooks. Let's call it first swiper and set first swiper. It's going to be useState. So I'll just copy down this code and then my second swiper. So I'll just copy down this whole code like so. So I have some few syntax errors. Let me just fix it. useState, not C const is just const. Remove the bracket. I have to rename this to second swiper. I have to rename this to set second swiper. And then what I can do is I can pass this like so. So set first swiper should go here. Set first swiper. And instead of control swiper, I have to pass in second swiper. I have to do the same for the second swiper as well. So control swiper is gonna have access to the first swiper. Whoops, I have to change to first swiper. So they're gonna sync themselves. Then set second swiper is set to set second swiper. And now I have to go to each of these components to fix my code. So going to main swiper, I'll basically go back to second swiper and then I'll add this like so. Set first swiper here, set first swiper, and then scrolling down. So on swiper, so assign my swiper instance to first swiper. Now do the same to second swiper. I'll just copy my controlled swiper code. I'll add it like so. So then my next step should be to add the control swiper. And I should scroll down this time. Here, control is my first swiper. Or here I can add just control swiper. Going back to app.tsx, I have to rename my prop as well. So going back up, I'll change it to set second swiper. Of course, this makes no sense. Let me just remove this. So going back to my Firefox window, we can see that changing the slide of the first slider changes the slider of my second slider. And if I do the same to my second one, surely enough, as you can see, my code works. So one more thing I forgot to change is these are basically duplicated. So I'll just remove the set second swiper here and let me test it out again. Yeah, so far so good. Let's now talk about effects. So basically they change the animation type of your slider. We can try this with the second slider component. So to add an effect, I can simply go to my modules array and then go effect card. So I want a card effect, and it would be better if I added a background color to my div as well. This would make my card effect easier to see. So a style, background color, let's say yellow. Going back to my Firefox window here, notice that we have a card effect, but it looks really bad. I want each of my card to have a different color. So let's go back. So within our array, let's add a color. For example, I want the first one to be pink. Let's do the second one to, for example, black. The third one, let's set it to green. And the fourth one, let's set it to orange. I can go down and then I can pass it like so. So item.color. So going back, as you can see, our card effect now looks way better than before. One thing I forgot to mention is sometimes we as developers, we forget to import the needed classes. So luckily here, the SwiperJS module has got your back. So instead of importing all of this, we can make our code even cleaner. To do so, we can go import swiper/css/bundle. So basically what this does is it will import all of these classes, so you don't need to keep on managing your imports yourself. So if I remove this, hopefully everything should work just as before. If I refresh, notice that it's still the same. So that's it for today. If you guys have any questions, let me know. In this video, you guys learned about the fundamentals of the Swiper React library. Furthermore, you guys learned how to use many crucial modules to improve your Swiper component. If you guys have any questions, let me know in the comment section below. Till then, bye bye.